Hey, this is Hunter with Lone Star Woodworking, and in this video, I take this $1,100 stack of walnut and turn it into a front door with a pretty cool glass insert, and I even get to flex some real woodworker skills in this project. Alright y'all, so you heard me right. This is $1,100 worth of walnut, which is quite a bit more than I intended on spending, and I created the final price, which is $3,500, based on the final piece and the board foot cost for that. What I didn't take into account is that Houston Hardwoods has, and by the way, this is no hate to Houston Hardwoods. Policy is policy. I totally am okay with it. It's just something I didn't take into account. But their policy says that for an offcut to go back on the shelf and for you to not be charged for it, it needs to be at least 6 feet in length. Well, I needed 7-foot sections and they only had 10 and 11-foot boards. So that wasn't going to be an option for me. So on the 10 boards that I bought, I ended up paying for an extra 35 to 40 board feet that I wasn't even going to use. It is what it is. It's just something to take into account for next time. Now, this whole thing started whenever a really nice couple from Galveston, which is a beach town here in South Texas, reached out to me and asked me what my opinions were, what my advice was on a hardwood species that could be used as a front door. And I was very honest and very blatant with her, and I said, I have no idea, because I've never built an outdoor piece of furniture. I've only built tables and little consoles and things like that that go inside. I've never built a piece of furniture that was meant to go out. Well, actually, that's a lie. I built this little pine table as my very first woodworking project that my wife now keeps her succulents on. That is the only outdoor piece of furniture that I've ever built, and I honestly don't care that it looks like crap right now. So I told her that if she was comfortable with my lack of experience in building a piece of furniture like this, that I would be more than happy to take it on, but I also wouldn't get my feelings hurt if she found someone else. She said, I'll get back to you in a couple days and let you know what we've decided, and I said, okay, hey, I appreciate you just talking to me and giving me the opportunity. Well, she got back to me and said, hey, we want to go with you, and I don't know if it was because she appreciated my honesty or because someone else just wasn't available, but I'm the one she went with. So I told her, okay, hey, this isn't going to be a quick process. I've never done this before. I want to make sure I'm doing everything to the letter to make sure you get the best possible product. And she said, that's perfectly fine. And by the way, we want a glass insert in this. And I thought, okay, I've done a few inlays before. That's not that hard. Now, all of this has led up to this point in the video where all I've done is just mill it a little bit past the S3S that I had it milled at Houston Hardwoods, meaning I just cut it to length in my shop and then I ripped off that rough edge in my shop. That's it. From there, I went through a few different iterations of layout to see exactly what they liked, because as you saw, these boards aren't really homogeneous. They don't have similar colors. And you can see that one in the center actually has a ton of sapwood. I actually like these kind of boards. I like the contrast. Not everybody does, though. These people happen to like it, though, which was awesome. They liked where it was. They didn't think that it would look good on either the left or the right because they said it would kind of make everything feel imbalanced, and I agreed with them. So we decided on a layout. I marked out where all of my biscuit mortises were going to go, hogged them all out, and now I'm gluing everything together. You see I had to use a little bit of percussive persuasion. This was quite a big glue up, so it was giving me a little bit of issues, but I got it done. Now, something important to note whenever you're using pipe clamps is that you have to alternate the pressure, meaning you have to have one on the bottom, one on the top. And this is no hate to pipe clamps. They're great. I use them all the time, obviously. They're easy to find, easy to replace, and it doesn't really matter if they break. But their problem is that they don't pull straight. So you need to try to alternate it and equalize that pressure as much as you can, and then use these clamping cauls in order to keep everything nice and flat. And if you rewind the video a little bit, you can actually watch the door flex up and down based on the different pressures that I'm applying from the clamps on the bottom versus the clamps on the top. Now, I had a couple of people, whenever I posted this on social media, ask if gluing the clamping cauls was going to be an issue. And you can see here, they pop off no problem. It's not enough glue to sit here and adhere these pine cauls so thoroughly that it's impossible to get them off. Now, I am not trying to make anything pretty with this sanding pass. I don't care how even or pretty the sanding pattern is. I'm just trying to get all the glue squeeze out cleaned off so that way I can start planning for all the little imperfections that I have to fill. Now, I'm going to flip it over and do the exact same thing, but I'm obviously not going to show you that process. But there is a little tip here. This was all the glue squeeze out that I couldn't get to because it was on the bottom whenever I was clamping everything up. So if you flip it over and you hit it with a heat gun or a torch or some kind of heat source, it tends to chisel or scrape out a little bit better without damaging the wood fibers of whatever it is you're working on. Once I had all of that glue squeeze out sanded off, it was time to get this thing down to its final dimensions of 83 inches long by 43 inches wide. And it took me about 15 to 20 minutes in between each of these cuts on all four sides because I wanted to make sure that my measurements were bang on of 83 and 43 and that everything was perfectly square because it's a door. It needs to fit inside of a certain space. It's not like building a table where if someone wants a 9-foot table and it turns out to be 8 feet 10 inches, that no one's going to care. If they wanted a door that's 83 inches and it's 81 inches, it's going to be painfully obvious. And then lastly is making sure that everything is square. Of course, I try to make square cuts on everything that I do, but on a table, it just simply doesn't matter that much if one of the angles is at 88 and the other one is at 92. It's just not that serious for a table. But again, this needs to fit inside of a very specific space, so it does matter on this. Now, what you've seen me do here is just basically prepare for this glass inlay. I had a video call with the clients. They told me where they wanted it and decided where it was going to look best for their space. I said, cool, I outlined it, and this is the template I'm going to be using for this inlay. It's super simple, all right? It's just a whole inch shorter than the glass itself, all right, on the length and width. So I'm using a 1/2-inch patterning bit, and I'm gonna take my first pass just to create that recess and figure out exactly where all of my left and right laterals are. Okay, then I'm gonna take my jigsaw, try to stay as close to the center of that recess as I possibly can, just to give myself some wiggle room, and remove it. Now, my initial attempt at doing this was actually just to drill a 1/2-inch hole and then stick a 1/2-inch flush trim bit in there and try to hog out all of that material at once. You can imagine it didn't go well since it's not in this video, but yes, I did film it. No, I'm not going to show it to you because I looked really stupid doing it. Once I got the little recess removed, I just kept going with that patterning bit, and I took it down pretty much as far as it could until it just bottomed out. And then I flipped it over and cleaned up that last little lip with the flush trim bit. And I don't know about y'all, but some of my favorite shots are these kind of cleaning up passes or these things that just make everything look nice with the router. It's just, that's my, I don't know what the opposite of an ick is, and I actually hate that I use the word ick in this video, but that's a very satisfying thing for me to watch. So now I'm going to use a 1/2-inch rabbiting bit, and I'm going to create the shelf that the glass is going to sit on. And this is pretty dang accurate from what I was expecting. I have never been this accurate before, and you saw how close that cut came to the line. I was pretty happy with this, and it was dead center of each side and where it needed to be on the top. Now, this is a little bit of chisel work that I have to do, and you've seen a couple of my videos where I try to do chisel work. Normally, it's only about 5 or 6 minutes of work, and then I just give up because I'm sucking at it. But on this one, I didn't really have an option. I had to try to be good at it, and it's not pretty, it's not great, But for my first attempt at doing some like real work that has a real impact on how things look, I'm pretty satisfied with that. And here you'll see that it fits just ever so perfectly. I was so happy to see this. And again, it was kind of a cool, proud moment for myself as a woodworker just to have something fit that accurately and not have to make any adjustments. So now what we're going to have to do is build a frame, some trim, a mold, whatever, to go around the glass, because these houses in Old Galveston are very Victorian, and so these doors have a certain look to them, often with a big upper design and a smaller lower design. So this is the upper design that we're going with, and it's super simple. It's nothing special. It's just something I pitched to the client. She said she liked the way it looked, or that it would be good enough, something along those lines. And so I went with it. And it's just making 2 passes with that round nose bit, about a 1/2 inch apart, and then putting this 30-degree bevel or chamfer or whatever it is on the outside of the frame. Now, before we can actually attach the frame, we need to attach the glass. And for that, I'm using liquid nails because it's all weather. It doesn't get rock hard, so it's not going to hold this glass firmly in place. So it's going to expand and contract with the seasons. And Houston, or just Texas in general, weather is crazy as it is. It'll fluctuate from 70 degrees all the way up to 110 in some cases. Well, Galveston tends to be a whole lot worse because, like I said, it's a beach town. It's right near the Gulf where a ton of tropical disturbances and hurricanes form. So I wanted to make sure that whatever was holding this glass in place, this tempered glass in place, wasn't going to hold it so firm that when the wood started trying to expand or contract, that it cracked the glass. That is my absolute worst nightmare for this piece. But you can see here the frame went together quite nicely. Everything was square. Everything outlined the glass just so perfectly. And this is that lower design that I was talking about that some of these Victorian doors had. I wasn't a huge fan of this, and I tried to talk the client out of it because I just thought it looked so out of place. It didn't look like it really belonged in the piece. But she was adamant that that's the style that she wanted, so of course I obliged. It's super simple. It's just 1.5 inch wide pieces with a 30-degree bevel on the inside to give it that depth effect. Nothing too serious. And yes, I know I should have filled this before I put the frame on. I was hungry, probably tired. I wasn't in my right headspace. I was just trying to get to a certain point that day, and that was an afterthought. We've all been there. So moving on to the sanding. The sanding was remarkably easy because I only had to go up to 180. And the reason I stopped at 180 is because I want the maximum amount of finish to absorb into this piece as possible for it to have its maximum amount of protection. Because again, the weather here in Houston in general, in Texas in general, and in Galveston is just especially crazy. So as much of the finish that could absorb as possible, the better. I was only going to stop at 120, but you can still see some of the curlicues from the sanding process, but once I went up to 180, those all disappeared. So that's why I stopped there. Now the corners were still super sharp at this point, and I wanted to break them just a little bit so that way it wasn't uncomfortable to just place your hand on the edge of the door. And this was the idea that I had, just to kind of go along it with some sandpaper and just barely file down those edges so that way it still remains as square as possible. Now you see I'm using Rubio Monocoat Hybrid Wood Protector. And the reason I'm using this is because I had a really good conversation with Brad over at Hamilton Lease Supply, and he's the one that kind of turned me on to this. He said that there was a colleague of his down here in Houston that built a front door for his house, and this is the exact finish process that he used, because I'm not done after I apply this Rubio. And by the way, it's super simple because it's only one part. It's not like the part A and part B that you get with normal Oil 2C Pure Rubio Monocoat. And this is how it looked just with the Rubio Monocoat on. And I was pretty happy to stop there if I thought that that's all that I had to do. But Brad, the guy at Hamilton Lee Supply, let me know that this ceramic was going to add another level of protection. Now, this is the black diamond ceramic. You can also get this at Hamilton Lee Supply. I don't know enough about these ceramic coatings to give any advice here. There's a lot of other creators on YouTube and just in general that either use this more consistently or actually have their own product, and they're better sources of information than me. And guys, this is the final product. It's certainly not perfect, but you know what? For my first door, for my first project like this, I'm very satisfied with this. Everything was square. Everything looked good. I just took away some very key learning points. And isn't that kind of the whole point of this woodworking thing anyway? All right, y'all. So that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. And I hope to see you next time. See ya.